All righty. So, second week, personal finance. Haven't got too many emails. I must not have screwed up too bad in terms of confusing people. I'm sure stuff will come up, term paper, things like that, later in the course, or people start asking about the homework. But it's not that difficult to just remember you don't have to turn it in each week. You turn it in prior to the big exams, the midterm and the final. Tonight we're going to talk about financial statements, personal financial statements. This is kind of a strange thing because there's not necessarily a necessity for kind of redundant there to come up with all these different documents, but it is helpful. Um, you know, Obviously you use these in a business sense if you're trying to put something together, um, you know, to run a business plan or do something like that. But I don't know. A lot of businesses, I've been fortunate enough where I've had some great ideas, or at least what I thought were great ideas, and they ended up not quite working out. And then I've had some kind of marginal ideas that ended up, doing fairly well. So I'm always leery about getting in too much debt when trying to start a new business venture. A lot of times if you kind of start small and test it out, and then maybe use it to finance your business ventures, that works out a bit better. So I would not say that number one, banks don't necessarily want to loan much money to small businesses. They prefer to loan them to existing businesses. It's kind of like when you really need money, it's hard to find, but when you don't need it, it's available. So anyway, but if you were going to go to a bank or try and get a loan from somebody, they'd probably want to see some documents. And it's only smart that if they want to see them, they must see some value in them. And you know, you before you get involved in a situation and you want to assess your financial position, you should probably also kind of have these documents. Now, you may have these documents kind of, the contents of it kind of running around in your mind, but it doesn't hurt to put it down and kind of organize it and you know make a template there. So, any cash flow statement. So, very important. Businesses, people, everybody, you know, can fail if they don't have appropriate liquidity. And cash is basically liquidity. So the inflows and outflows. So the operating expenses and the incoming money and budgeting. We'll talk about again tonight. So you for just a personal situation, your inflows are going to be salaries, interest, dividends. Maybe you got some rent from something. Um, you know. Anyway, um, disability. You know, whatever's coming in. And then the outflows are going to be all those expenses. So obviously large and small. Create a statement. So revenues and expenses over a period of time and net cash flow inflows minus outflows. So you can quickly tell whether you're going to be, solvent, whether you're going to be able to continue. Um, if the outflow is considerably more than the inflow, then it's not going to take long before you're broke. So um, here she's Stephanie Spratt. She's come up with her thing, 2,500. And so you got to kind of laugh at some of these numbers. Um, I don't know what you can get for 600. Maybe she's got some roommates. $50 on the internet, 300 on groceries. So that's probably reasonable. Who knows what healthcare and insurance expenses are? Clothing, I tend to buy in clumps, but anyway, you should see the way I dress. So, um, car expenses, $200. That's a tank of fuel. Recreation, $600. Good order. But I don't know where that's. I mean, and you should, you know, spend money. I would feel better if this was maybe in a travel category, something you might remember. But if this is playing pool or doing something like that, it's probably not a great thing when you're, spending as much as you rent on other things. Anyway, using these numbers, she's plus 400. So that's positive. So just like we talked about last week, one of these things is investment, and you get this. So this inflow is 2,500. So you say, I'm going to save 10% each month. So you just put 250 and, just making another category. And then so the the cash flow instead of being positive 400 would be positive 150. But hey, that 150 is truly excess, you know, that you've already budgeted for. Anyway, so factors affecting, yeah, career path, college, retirement. Yeah, you can go back and forth though. I mean, people are much more volatile. The days of, just getting a job and sticking with it for life. Sometimes that's, especially, what we saw just in the past couple of years, that whole dynamic's changed a lot. So a path, sometimes it's a path with a lot of forks in it. So, but to have a financial plan and not be, indebted to the employer, I can't quit or I'll lose my insurance. I can't quit or will lose my house. Those are, you get job locked. You get stuck in situations. So I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but it's something you want to try and prevent. You want to preserve your freedom, your liberty as much as possible, so that you can make choices and you know make make career switches and geographical switches as you want. Um, Skill level. So part of the thing on the term paper, when assessing your financial situation, one of the elements is to go through and see. You may be under the illusion that, oh, I'm going to be a whatever, let's say a veterinarian, and I'm going to get paid a ton of money. Yeah, that's tough to do. I work with veterinarians all the time. I really appreciate their skills and all that, but compared to like medical doctors, they're not exactly killing it for the same amount of money, for the same amount of education. And so, you know, I applaud people who do it, and especially if they have a passion for it. But you have to go into these situations with your eyes open. The worst case scenario is one of my daughters worked for a veterinarian here locally, and this guy, all he did was whine about how he went to as much medical school as a regular doctor, yet he didn't get paid as much. Well, dude, you should have checked that out before you committed to it. Or said, that's the way it is and I'm comfortable with it because I prefer to, deal with animals than people. So whatever. But anyway, there's some sites. There used to be Glassdoor, but websites change. Sometimes they're good and then they sell to somebody else or they just change their business model. But there are sites out there that will tell you if you want to be a whatever radiologist or whatever, pick your profession. They have some information in terms of what kind of the salary range is, and I'm not saying it's not all about money. It's just all about making sure that you know what works and what doesn't. I mean, my daughter's got great medical skills, and man, if she'd be a urologist, she'd get paid 850,000 a year starting. Now, I don't know that I'd wish that on her, but if you're purely about money, that will certainly do it. It's probably not the most pleasant work, but anyway, there are ways around that. Now, if you take one of the lower paying jobs, but it's something you really enjoy and you want to do that, that's completely you can be completely financially successful. It doesn't mean you need to be poor your whole life. It just means you need to be smarter. And so there's some books. There's where's Rich Dad Poor Dad or the Wealthy Barber is probably something better. It's a fairly light read, and it's just about a guy who was a barber and barbers they that's a respectable profession, but it's not a super high wage profession. But the guy was just very disciplined about saving. Started young, you know, started doing real estate stuff or whatever you want, and take up that investing as a hobby and live semi frugal at first, and you can outperform some of these people. Some of these people who are making tons and tons of money. That's the other extreme. I've worked and whatever dated some women that were just killing it in terms of money. But this one in particular, she was just a mess. She had a dog walker. She had somebody take care of her kids. She had a personal trainer for this. She had lived on a huge house on the hillside. She was like a C-suite person with one of the big corporations in town. You know, Anyway, and what a miserable life. I mean, whatever. Obviously, she didn't care for me judging her, so and I'd never really judged her face, but I just looked at that situation and said, if you walk your own damn dog with your kid, life could be so much better. But anyway, so there's different ways to find success. Wow, off the rails, and we're only 2 minutes into it. Number of income earners in your household. So yeah, but this again is kind of funny. I lived in Spain for a long time, and even here in the U.S., it used to be, and I'm not being sexist here, but it used to be the man went off to work and the housewife stayed home, and they did just fine. They had cabins and boats, and they did all right. Now it's like two people working, and they're barely scraping by. And my point about Spain was in all these old homes in Spain, they all had maids' quarters. You know, now these people are both working, they can't even afford to do their own stuff, much less hiring a maid. So the the there's the wealth divide, the uber wealthy and the uber poor. It's a whatever. I don't see that changing. It seems like it's getting worse. So anyway, the deal is right now both people working, both in a relationship, whether it be it's not important whether it's the man or the woman or the whatever. It's just that both people are typically working. So it's unfortunate. Also, size of the family, age, personal consumption behavior. This again in relationships can be a problem. You get a spender and a saver, but there may be a solution, or at least a positive aspect, and part of that may be budgeting. And if things are written down and you kind of agree to it ahead of time, and you do that method where you pay yourself first, then you don't have to quibble over money. If in her little example where she's got 150 bucks at the end of the month, granted the number is going to be different, but if it's in the unused category, then the two of you or whatever don't have to stress over what's going to be done with that money because all the bills are paid and the investments are taken care of. So it's a little bit better. So this is how it's supposed to work. I don't know why you'd be making more money through college. I don't know. Career, this perfectly, it's not going to be, and it could be where you get to this point, you said, man, I made a lot of money and this is the better way to do it, and say, boom, I'm off the grid. And retirement is not such a big deal. Retirement and just sitting around, that'll kill you. You need to stay active. So maybe find something you like to do and continue on an even keel, but no longer being forced to do something you don't want to do because you made some money, you got things squared away, the house is paid for, and now you're going to pursue that thing you really like. Who knows? Um, anyway, budgeting. So creating a budget, cash flow statement, forecasted, budget's useful. So like I say, I do not do budgets. I tend to review my expenses because you have to. You have to, especially like I think I mentioned, I use almost exclusively credit cards, which I think is a pretty good strategy because I end up, not having to buy airline tickets ever. And I pay it off every month, so I'm not paying any fees for that. And then I can go back and look at all of my expenses. And sometimes it's also useful. Again, I keep talking about my daughters here, but one of my daughters just was down in Atlanta and was taking a taxi just like to a hotel, and the dude charged $150 for like a 4-minute taxi ride. And, she called me in tears, and I called the credit card company and said, hey, this was a scam. And they shut it down. And, if she would have paid cash, she would have been gone, done. There would have been no thing. She was lucky to get out of the situation. Turned out the guy holding the taxi token or whatever, I don't know what was going on, but the person who actually the taxi token was issued to was murdered like a few weeks prior. So could have been an even worse situation. But anyway, a credit card at least gives you some recourse in terms of perhaps if you truly get ripped off as opposed to cash. Plus, losing cash and just fumbling with cash and all that other stuff is just not good. So anyway, here she goes with her budget again. What's she doing now? Something happened here. because she was plus 400. Yeah. So recreation had some car expenses more. Anyway, um, okay, I got to figure this out. 50, 60. I don't know why they use the brackets, but anyway, for some reason she had additional expenses in a couple categories. So perhaps having a sort of a set aside fund. You get 10% of your income. You start setting it aside, and then what's going into perhaps a brokerage account, like I was talking about. Maybe not directly invested, but at least in a separate account to be invested in the future, or when or perhaps right into mutual funds. But anyway, also in that brokerage type account, you could have, say, a separate like money market account, which is not a big deal, just like a kind of equivalent to a checking account, but perhaps maybe earns real interest. And you keep about whatever, maybe 6 grand in there, and then once it gets to 6 grand, then you leave that account alone and you concentrate on your regular investing. So anyway, that 6 grand in that extra brokerage cash account now becomes your emergency fund. So when something unexpected happened, you know, looks like she had a car problem and some medical issues that could have been related. Anyway, she could have dipped into that and kept on with her account, because it's not a budget item to have those unusual expenses. These are, forecasted, sort of fixed expenses. So that's what I would do, and that's a way to not have these um, burbles in the account. There is just to have an emergency fund to draw on. And again, the car breaks down, you put it on the credit card, you go to that brokerage account, you pull that money out, you pay off the credit card, boom. So it doesn't mean that you have to, wait for the brokerage account money to get out of there to do all that paperwork before you fix the car. Now you just fix. That's why it's great to have a credit card with a available balance on it, and you just do that. So more on her budget. Small shortages from your checking account. Again, I would advise you not to keep large amounts. You don't want to necessarily keep your emergency fund in your checking account for a couple of reasons. One, identity theft. There's a lot of volume, a lot of transactions going in and out of there, and it's fraud would be easy to see in there if you've got quite a bit of money. And then the other business is just you yourself. When you've got that money burning a hole in your pocket, when you see you got 10 grand in your checking account, you're going to be more apt to make bad decisions. So anyway, compare it, and then adjustments may be necessary. So lots of tools to do this. We'll talk about a few online things. We'll look at some of those. Unusual expenses, seasonal stopping. When I was growing up, my parents had 6 kids, and I remember my mom always talking about this Christmas club thing. Or you'll see other people do it with like layaways, maybe at Walmart or one of the department stores or something like that, where they put an amount of money and when Christmas comes, it's not like they have to pay for all that in December or January. No, they put $100 aside every month, and they got a little over $1,000 to spend on Christmas presents. So keeps them more in the Christmas spirit. Here she is doing a cash flow thing. She's looking at the heirs, looking at the differences. So yeah, if this healthcare expenses is actually going to be up that high every month, and again, I think with car expenses, just in terms of fuel, I think her initial thing wasn't certainly in line with 2022. So you would revise it. Yep. Don't become overly dependent upon others. Yeah, nobody wants to have you borrowing money all the time. And you need to learn to live within the means. You either learn it now or you learn it later, but you gotta get that discipline at some point. And here she's doing it on an annualized budget. So fair enough. So I mean, some people, they need a budget. They have to be very methodical. I knew a guy and he and his wife, and he would have to basically show receipts and whatever. Just ugh. So here's a couple sites. Now the problem with sites, and the reason why I don't like saying, "Oh, this is a great one," is because it may have been great at some point. I know students who loved Mint, but now I think maybe it's kind of gone. Nerd Wallets out there, that's another one. The problem with these though, and just keep in mind that if it's free, you're the product, you're what's being sold. So they're selling, your information, and sometimes that's fine. You as a emerging college student are a great target, and so they may have similar goals to you. They may want you to invest wisely, and they want to develop clients. You as your demographic is the prime. You always hear about the demographics when they talk about it in ratings or whatever. It's not the people with money that they're after. Those people are, you know whatever. You talk to somebody in their 50s or whatever, and if they're like a you know Marlboro Budweiser drinking guy, it would take fantastic amounts of money to change that guy's preference. But somebody who's in college who yet doesn't have the money but's got, 30, 40 years of buying ahead of them, that's the person they want to get. They're always thinking into the future. So, I'm not saying you guys drink beer and smoke cigarettes, but all your buying habits, they will you represent a great asset to them, so those guys will want to target you. So let's just look at those real quick. This may work. Probably won't. We'll try control. That's 2 tries. We're good. So Mint, you can see Intuit, right? Intuit is huge. TurboTax, QuickBooks, Mint. So if they can get you on their little financial world, all their little companion products are going to come your way. But, you know, give it a go if it works for you. I mean, these things are ways that concentrate on managing your money and helping you and you know get your credit up to speed and all that other stuff. Credit scores, credit cards. I've got a dog in heat if you didn't notice. She's locked away. God, we'll have to go take care of that in a second if we can. Okay, so that's one, Nerd Wallet, but I think they've been around. No, that was Mint. Here's Nerd Wallet. So another one. So anyway. So my point is that there's lots of apps out there and more than what I've got listed. So if you have to do a budget, and you may want to just do it, on a piece of paper or Excel spreadsheet and keep it all to yourself. But anyway, interesting options that you have. Personal balance sheet. So we looked at cash flows back on the previous one. This one is just going to be, liabilities and assets. So this is, just tells you whether you have a net worth. I mean, I don't know. I guess a negative net worth is still a net worth technically, but anyway, you want to find whether you're underwater or over water. Now, again, if you've got something like crypto in your portfolio, this could change by the minute. So crypto's an interesting bit though, and it's got so much potential. Whether you're investing in it, but I think you'll probably be using some of the apps associated with it, whether you kind of know it or not. And hopefully it's going to have a positive. Uh, well, it should if it's allowed to kind of continue, and it's tough to not allow. I'm not saying they have that kind of control where they can shut it down, but anyway, balance sheet, assets and liabilities. So liquid assets, that's cash type stuff. Um, and sometimes you can say like say stock is an asset, liquid asset, but because you can sell it and or crypto's probably been a better one. You can certainly convert that into cash or spend it as crypto itself. But the wisdom, this doesn't say, the reason why cash is reasonable is cash's value doesn't change by the day. Um, Commodity type things and equity type things, their value changes all the time. So, um, if you need cash for unexpected things, having it all tied up in volatile investments may not be the best way. But you want as much as you can in the investment so that you can, harness that appreciation. Other things, I wouldn't even bother. A home certainly I would bother, but things like furniture and stuff, how are you going to convert that into cash quickly? That's tough. I know people say, oh, that, whatever, that table's worth this much or that antique piece of furniture. If you have somebody standing there ready to buy it, but if you're selling it at a discount on Craigslist or something, I'm not sure how you're going to get rid of it. A home is the basically the example of a non-liquid asset because homes, real estate take time to get rid of. Um, the great asset, very stable, all sorts of tax advantages, the rest of it. Likewise, a car. Cars are not an investment. They're unless it's some sort of classic, but a regular driving car, yeah, they're a depreciating asset. And especially if you bought it new, the depreciation is horrendous at the first part. So there's kind of a bubble right now, and used cars are might be worth more than what you paid for it if you bought it a year or two ago. But that's kind of an anomaly. Um, Market value. So establishing those market values with a home, you can do that. You can get an appraisal and you can establish that. But car, you can do that to a certain extent too. But it's based upon time. It's the value is just decaying as you go. But furniture is tough. I was spent a lot of time in the Middle East, and people would buy these carpets. Very nice Persian rugs and things like that. And they were always talking about how valuable they were. And anyway, I got one time from a Turkish friend of mine. I was flying back to New York, whatever, for a weekend, and I took some of those rugs with him that were worth probably about $1,500 a piece, and his price was like 300 a piece. So I took like five of them with me, and I went to a rug dealer at this sketchy place in New Jersey, and said, "What will you give me for them?" And they're like, "About 300 a piece." So I mean, because they were a dealer, that's what they buy them for. If I wanted to sell them to somebody, it would be, what am I going to do? Sell them on eBay or Craigslist? Nobody going on there is going to pay full retail price. So it's tough when you're valuing personal items. It can be done. There's even some interesting things now where they do, fractional shares in fine art because the art market is very strong. But anyway, investing in collectibles and things like that is a little bit more difficult and a little beyond the scope of this course. Bonds, stocks. So bonds, what bonds are, is these can be either corporate or government bonds, but they're a loan. Let's say a company, a big corporation or a municipality or something wants to build something or wants to invest in the company and they don't want to sell any part of the company. They don't want to dilute the equity in that company at all. So they'll issue a bond. And so they'll say, you as the investor, if you give our company 20 grand, we'll give you your 20 grand back 10 years from now. And in the interim, we'll give you a series of payments every month to basically rent that money from you. And fair enough, you do that. Um, Stocks, what you do with stocks is this is a corporation, not, so the bonds can be either from a company or a government agency. Stocks are going to be from a corporation. And what they're going to do, they also want money, but they don't want to have to necessarily pay it back. And they don't mind selling a little bit of equity in the company. So they'll say, look, we'll sell you. a fractional part of the company. You actually own a little chunk of that company, in the form of a stock in that company. So we'll sell all these stocks to you, and you will participate in, say, if the stock price goes up. You buy the stock for 20 and it goes up to 30, you can sell it for that. Or it may be an income stock where a big, huge company and the stock price isn't really going up much anymore. But in order to entice you to buy the shares, we'll pay you a dividend. We'll get some of the profits and we'll turn that back over to you. And, so essentially you're getting interest. Actually, in this case, it's called a dividend. And, or it can be both. Some big companies can go up in price, so you can get a dividend and price. But typically, small companies don't pay a dividend. Growth companies, because they're building, they want more, more buildings, more production, so they get all their profits and they reinvest it into the company. And you're fine with that because you're thinking that this company is going to get so much bigger and their stock price is going to go up. So anyway, you can own these stocks and bonds as a personal investor. Mutual funds, what you do with a mutual fund is to invest. When you buy the stock, you buy, one share in, let's say, Ford Motor Company. And, that might be a reasonable bet and might not. You're pretty much sure that everybody's got a drive, though. Whether it be electric vehicles, and maybe Ford will get into that, but maybe GM would do it, maybe other companies would do it. Maybe you might think, in order to kind of mitigate the risk from being all in on Ford, maybe you buy a mutual fund that owns a bunch of shares. So they own, you buy this mutual fund that's like it can be made of anything. It can be in a sector, it can be in whatever. But keeping with my example, it's going to be a, personal transportation mutual fund. And so the fund managers, they buy shares and they put them all in this fund together. They buy shares in Ford and GM and Tesla and maybe even some Neo, Chinese stuff, Chinese electric vehicles. Anyway, they buy kind of a little bit of every spectrum out there of transportation. And that way, if one of those companies goes out of business, you're not hurt that bad. If one of them does really well, you'll participate in that. So it's a more of a conservative bet. So we'll talk a lot more about mutual funds, but mutual funds are just sort of a fund that's comprised of a lot of different stocks of a lot of different companies to kind of balance your risk. And also they're denominated in dollars, and it used to be difficult to buy shares, not anymore, but shares in individual companies, you buy them in even lots, and you have some Yahoo, sitting there with his hand up in the air buying none of that happens anymore. It's all computer process. So I don't own any mutual funds really anymore. Anyway, I used to. Companies, if you go to work for a company and you're doing a 401k, you've got mutual funds. If you're an Alaskan citizen and you're getting the PFD, that's kind of a mutual fund where they've got a lot of real estate holdings, but they have other stuff. And mutual funds can have some real estate in them. Now there can be other ones that are specifically holding real estate. In this case, personal balance sheet, this can just be direct ownership. So this can be you buying a few condos or a duplex or something like that, rental property. So anyway, but on your balance sheet, your investments would show up, your bonds, your stocks, mutual funds, real estate, and I'd put crypto down here as well. Crypto's kind of fun. If you guys don't know much about it, I don't know, maybe Bitcoin and Ethereum might go into the investment category, but the other stuff goes in the speculation category. So if you're putting away 10% of your income every month, if you're putting it into little altcoins, Shiba Inu or whatever, however you pronounce it, or Dogecoin, yeah, you're you're not quite an investor. You are a speculator. All bets are off. You're probably better off putting 10% of your money in investments, and then if you have extra money at the end of the month, that's where that speculation kind of stuff should go. But anyway, he shows up. Liabilities, current liabilities. This is what you owe. So by definition, per the IRS and per everything else, when we say short-term and long-term in personal finance, 1 year is the cutoff. So the IRS, well, the reason why it's a big deal, if you make money, let's say selling stock, and you're like a day trader, it can get kind of expensive from a tax perspective because the amount of taxes charged will be based upon your um, normal tax bracket of your income. So let's say you're making decent money and you're paying whatever 28, 30 some percent in personal income taxes. That's what that stock trade or that crypto trade will be taxed at. If you say you bought that stock and you kept it over a year, then that tax paid on it would be down around 15%. So typically half. So anyway, we're getting into tax stuff, but anyway, it's going to be consistent throughout the class when they say long term. Long term means greater than a year. So anyway, difference between what you own and what you owe. Balance sheet. You did this, and boom. So here she's got hers. So yeah, it's kind of interesting, but again, I hold real estate in a wholly different net worth category than I put car and furniture and some of these other things. I had a guy talk to me about how much all his wardrobe was worth. Used clothes are not a something that I'm not buying used clothes. Anyway, I don't know who would be. Stocks, that's legit. Um, but these other items, it's mainly, cash, stocks, real estate, things like that. Classic cars definitely would be in there. Antique furniture that's got a great market, that'd be in there. But some pressboard IKEA stuff, not. Current liabilities, long-term liabilities. So again, yeah, should not be carrying a balance on the credit card. There's very few investment schemes that can get you anywhere near the amount of money. If you are, you know, setting aside whatever amount of money for investing each month, yet you're carrying a credit card balance, you're screwing up. You got to have the credit cards down to zero. It's not realistic to think that you can, in your investments, outperform the credit card interest. Changes the personal balance sheet. Yep. Purchase of a new car. Yep. Here she purchased a car. Again, I mean, spending money is fun. Spending money is a good thing, but spending money on a home, on something that's going to stabilize the value, that's a great thing. Spending money on, snow machines, cars, and other stuff, that's necessary sometimes, but it's not a positive financial move. Impact on the economy. Yeah, some of these things are outside of our control. Now, you can geographically move to a different economy if it's a regional thing, but anyway. Yep. As interest rates start to rise, you're going to see home prices start to stabilize or even go down for a while because there's fewer people in the market, fewer people who can afford them. So there's less pressure, less buyers in the market. It's a supply demand thing. Yeah. About net cash flows. Anyway, you should always be thinking about investing. And if you do things right, I've got a lot of investments that are things that I enjoy. That's why I like real estate because you can own property that you live in. You can own equipment that generates money for you, but is also being depreciated and helping you out on taxes. So a lot of things you can do. Liquidity ratios. The higher the liquidity ratio, the greater the liquidity. So anyway, somebody may ask for that, and that's just dividing those. Hopefully, it's a positive number or greater than one in any case. Debt to asset ratio, but again, not all debt is the same. If you can, there's just recently you could have been out there getting loans at like under 3%, and with inflation raising like it is, that is a great position to be in when you're controlling an asset that's appreciating and the money you're using to pay it off is worth less and less. There's a lot of moving parts, but anyway, if you've got you know a lot of money borrowed, inflation is not necessarily a bad thing. If you're trying to save money, that's not necessarily a good thing. All right. So anyway, I didn't mean to confuse things too much in there, but it is useful to know kind of your cash flows, to know your net worth, to keep track of that. And again, yeah, I mentioned before, don't fool yourself because just because somebody's living in $1 million home doesn't mean they're a millionaire. It means that perhaps they're a millionaire if it's paid off, or perhaps they've got $1 million loan. There's worse things out there. $1 million loan with very low interest rates and inflation. That person's controlling a big chunk of property that's appreciating. So that's not a bad situation, but you wouldn't say they've got a positive net worth at that point. Time value concept. So the preface to all this is do not stress about the formulas. Do not worry about the little having to remember PV, present value, and FV, future value, and I is interest, and N is the number of periods. That's just not how it's done anymore. People have financial calculators. They have online calculators that maybe, you know, have other things like taxes and insurance and stuff and are more accurate calculators for some of the solutions we're looking at. So for this course, you're not going to be doing, high powered interest problems. The book kind of goes in the old school approach, but it's typically just not done. Now the concept is important, but the mechanics of the calculation are not. So it's not cheating to look online and look Google in present value of this and find some calculator and you just put the number in the box and the other number in the box. That's just how it's done. So pause this thing real quick. So last week, using those Excel spreadsheets, we did a much better job of talking about the time value of money. You can go in there and look at the examples and see how money is influenced by time. So all these things are all these words that they're talking about, the earlier you start saving, the more quickly, whatever. It's better reinforced by you looking at those charts and just seeing the impact and the kind of the miracle of compound money, because it's almost beyond, what we normally can comprehend. We know that, $100 today is worth more than, $100 given to us, 10 years from now. But to actually comprehend it, it helps to look at the charts. So all sorts of sort of complex math problems, if you do them manually. I mean, we're not talking calculus or anything, but there's these factors and stuff, and it just gets kind of confusing. So sometimes you want to know a single amount, um, called a lump sum, or an annuity. Annuity means a series of annual payments, equal cash payments in this case. Um, anyway, so if somebody gives you $100 today, that's a single dollar amount. If somebody gives you, $10 um, every month for 10 months, that is, an annuity, and that would be a series of equal payments. So it when you're looking at formulas and looking at calculations, it makes a difference how the money is given to you. Compounding, that is the process of earning interest on interest, and it's friggin' phenomenal. Determine the future amount, so the amount of your deposit today, so present value, PV, interest rate, the little I there, and so they're going to put this in a formula and try and make it much more complex than it is, and it's just not worth it. So FVIF, future value, how much is it going to be worth in the future? And then they're going to jump into these tables. So back in the day, they had to use all these tables, but those tables are long since gone. When you used to look at a home or something, real estate agents would have these tables on the back of their business cards, and now they're just overcome by events. So there's all sorts of practical problems, things in your life where you need to do, present value, future value kind of stuff. So, um, how much will I have in 5 years? So invest 5,000, 4%. So anyway, there's reasons you want to know that. Here they're going to use a formula, the N, the I, da 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 da. Anyway, or you could just type it into one of the online calculators. Things like bankrate.com or some of these other calculators will work just fine. And it doesn't matter whether, it's for a mortgage or some sort of, you know, other type of calculation app. The real estate ones are usually better because they will kind of remind you of when you're looking at, like, say, home mortgage payments. If you're looking at trying to figure out how much your home mortgage payments, it will remind you that there are additional expenses when when, let's say, your mortgage payment is 1,400 a month. The actual note, the actual bill that's being paid is probably down around 1,000 or 1,100, and the 400 are things are going to go in an escrow account to pay the insurance and the rent. Uh, Mortgage companies are very happy to see you put that stuff in an escrow account rather than leave it to you to pay the property taxes at the end of the year. They would rather have it in an account so that they're confident it gets paid and their asset is secured and doesn't go into default for lack of taxes being paid. Number of years. So again, I'm not glossing over this stuff so much, but if you understand compound interest, it doesn't matter whether it's compound interest you're earning or compound interest you're paying. And that's getting back to my credit card thing. If you're paying 20 some percent in credit card interest, that's horrific. And if you look at it over the span of a number of years, it just gets worse and worse and worse. So impact of higher rates. So this comes up quite often. And again, that's why you don't want to get wrapped up in the formulas and stuff. You want to be able to do these calculations quickly, because there's a certain point in time where you have a mortgage rate at 4%. You're like, that's not bad, but rates are now 3%. Is a better deal to refinance? Well, obviously we know it's a percent cheaper, but there's fees involved, and how much cheaper is it? And there's a lot of moving parts. So again, um, being able to do those calculations quickly is positive. And so with this bar chart, they're trying to emphasize just how your money can grow over time at 10% interest. There's also a thing too that's not necessarily, and there's some science behind it, but it's called the rule of 72. And it's just one of these things. I'm sure we could draw out a formula to explain it to everybody, but it's just kind of a something nice to have in the back of your mind. If somebody says, well, I'm getting 10% interest on my money, how long will it take that money to double? Is that really useful? I don't know. It's kind of a gee whiz kind of thing, but I can tell you if you're getting 10% interest and say you invest 5,000, it will take you 7.2 years for that money to double. And how do I know that? Because of the rule of 72. You divide the interest rate into 72 and it tells you how long it takes that money to double. So let's see if it's true. So this guy's got 1,100 bucks, and so it's got to be up to 2,200. And when's that going to happen? Yeah, they're saying right in here. So I don't know. I have more faith in the rule of 72 being in the back of my mind than I do even on this chart. But you can see even this chart's pretty close. So it's just kind of a gee whiz thing. So, but the same thing is true. If I'm paying, you know, 20% interest on my credit card, how long does it take for my $5,000 outstanding balance on my credit card to become $10,000? About 3 years, 3.5, whatever. 20% divided into 72 is going to go about 3.5 times. So, power of compounding. So again, there's no words that they can say that will express what a chart would, and you just going through it. Long-term debt. Yep. But again, you get in the other situation. I've got a brother who's kind of the opposite of me. I've got crypto and fair amount of speculative type stuff. I've always just done that, and he is like very, very methodical and very stable and wants to own everything outright, and is in a hurry to pay off his home. And he looked at my thing and he said, "Well, you still owe a little bit of money." And I said, "Yeah, but the interest rate is 2.8%. I'm not giving that money back. I will keep that loan as long as I can, uh, and any excess money I will invest that." So it's different strategies. But if a lot of people, some of the evangelist kind of people on the radio, some of the financial people are talking about being debt free all the time. And anyway, different types of debt are different. So now using borrowed money for investments, that's called margin, and that can get quite scary. It's done quite frequently, and there's people who even do it with crypto as well. I would definitely not recommend that. I don't even buy money stocks on margin either, but we'll talk about that as we get there. There's some unique issues. But real estate, all day. Discounting, kind of a silly concept. I've never really, it's always mentioned, but I never really see it happen. Let's say the prevailing interest rate is 3.25, and for some reason you want to pay 3%. You can pay the loan company points and buy down that loan. Um, that's discounting if you hear it used in terms of mortgage. So when they say, "Are you interested in buying points?" that means buying a lower interest rate, paying a cash payment to get a lower interest rate. In practice, it's always mentioned, but I never see it really done. Discounting, this is what they're talking about, the process of obtaining present value. So you get some 25,000 in the future. How much do I have to invest now to have 25,000 in the future? I know that I want, I'm going to buy this cabin from my whatever from my cousin in 5 years, and I need $75,000 to do it. Um, what what do I need to invest now to end up with $75,000  5 years in the future? And so uh, that's what you're doing. You're taking it back to that number. And so let's say I had 45 grand and I invest it. Um, well, I could end up with more than that. But anyway, that's what you do. You get to figure out how much money you need now uh, to get in the future. That's process of discounting. Anyway, present value is related to that as well, and then some interest rates. So don't get too wrapped up in some of the stuff. The main takeaway, if you learn nothing else in this course, and that's why I started with it the first day, is compound interest, the effect both positively and negatively it can have on you. So present value, amount of money to be received in the future, interest rate, and number of years. And you see this with lottery type things all the time. Do you want to take this lump sum right now of $1 million, or do you want this annuity paid out over 5 years of $2 million? And, obviously people who did the lottery, they're not good at math to start out with. And now they're faced with this math problem of whatever. And so they probably should get some guidance on that. Present value table. So so they finally let the cat out of the bag here. And even a financial calculator, the purpose-driven financial calculators they're kind of a unitasker. Most of the stuff is just done on regular software. No need for a specific calculator unless you're doing it over and over again. So this guy wants 5,000 5 years by making a single investment today. 7%. What's the dollar amount you need? So this is the cabin problem. You're going to buy the cabin for 50 grand, 5 years. How much money do I need to put away today? I'm going to get 7% on it to achieve that goal. So 35 grand. Now the reason I'm not a big fan of these formulas is because you just pull this 0.713 out of because that's the factor that goes along with it. So it's just this whole magic element. You're doing a lot of calculations, but you're relying on pulling a number off of a table. Annuities. So annuity is just a term that means a single. We'll talk about annuities when we get to insurance as well. It's a series of equal payments, typically annual, as in, that's where the and part comes from, but they seem to just go with a series. So it's not that complex. I mean, you can do it the old school way. I'm just saying that, you're going to have to kind of relearn it each time, as opposed to going and using a menu type thing. Now, here is a lottery problem. Sometimes there's other factors too, like I'm not there yet, but when people start taking Social Security, you can delay and get a larger amount if you delay taking it. But I think I'll take it at the first opportunity so I can invest that money. I think I can do better than they do. So using our example at the table, determine the end of 20 years, you would have quite a bit of money, 6 million. So again, that discounting term, it's just a term used for those types of calculations. So it gets a bit redundant. There's basically 4 ways of doing it: future values and present values. And then so that's 2 ways: present and future values. And then the other, refinements on that are whether they come as a lump sum payment or whether they come as a series of payments. There may be other considerations, but using this formula, yeah. So this is a case where the guy wants to future value from savings, provide motivational annual savings. So this is, where you want to buy that cabin in the future, but you don't have a lump sum right now, but you're going to start putting chunks down against it to end up with that big chunk at the end. It should give us an example. How it fits within your plan. Anyway, it should be more mechanical than this. I like to start out with a percentage because a percentage, when you're not making a tremendous amount of money, 10% is not a tremendous amount of money, but when you're mid-career making quite a bit of money, 10% is a quite a bit larger amount rather than coming up with a absolute dollar figure. And there's the homework. So anyway, look at those problems, read through them. You can look at the formulas in the book, but I guess I've talked enough about, financial calculators and stuff. Let me just see if I can find one real quick. And I guarantee I can. So again, golly, a lot of garbage in there. Should have done that differently. Um, and I spell it wrong. Great. I'm sorry. Okay, pretend this didn't happen. Future. Okay, so futurevaluecalculator.net. So there we go. See, isn't this more? I don't know. I think it's more intuitive, you know. And here's the number of periods. So they're still going to use the N, the PV, the I payment. You're not cheating. This is how it's done. Whatever gets you to the answer for your needs is completely legitimate, and that's on calculator.net. If I went to Bankrate, the reason I might do that is because their calculators, if I'm looking at buying a home, it's going to have, more specific tailored. So length of loan, interest rates, and then you get advanced options. It's going to start, now they're starting to mine some data from you. But the homeowner's insurance, the HOA fees, if you forget about that when you're trying to decide what you can afford, oh, my rent payments, whatever, $1,000, $1,000 mortgage, I'll be great. Well, guess what? With rent, you're not paying, homeowners insurance. You're maybe paying some renters, certainly not paying property tax. So some of these things in HOA, yeah. Anyway, there's more to it. So when you get in one of these more specific calculators, it may provide better information. So you're not going to be doing these problems just for trivia's sake. You'll usually have something in mind, and so a purpose-built calculator with nice graphics and all that may be more useful to you. Is my thing. Amortization schedule. I mean, there's all kinds of neat little graphs and stuff, and this is going to shock you. We'll talk more about this later, but you're going to be all frustrated because you're going to go, oh man, my first payment here, 1182, but I'm only paying that much towards the loan and I'm paying that much towards the interest. Really? I don't want to do that. The balance is not going down much at all. But then you look way in the future, click to expand, you're going to see that, you know, way towards the end of the loan, well, let's look at it. Man, your payment is still, well, let's go back to where they're even. December 17th, 2051. So I'm not even going to be here. But anyway, 1182, 1174 is paid towards the principal. 780 is paid toward interest. That's huge. These are important things to know because when I say, you get used to having your deduction every year for paying on your home because you're able to deduct your interest. So although you're paying a bunch of interest at first, a lot of it's tax deductible. Here at the end, you got a whopping $7.80 worth of tax deductible stuff. So it's going to actually become maybe a bit more expensive for you. But in December 7th, 2051, $1,182 will not even get you a tank of gas. So I wouldn't worry about it. But anyway, cool stuff. Lots of stuff out there that's available if you search around. Some of you may already be aware of some of this stuff, but useful. All right. Um, that's about it for tonight. Send me emails or anything if you want me to go more in depth in other categories. Some of these lectures are kind of like this, where we got to stick with the format of the book, but some of the information they're presenting is useful, but the way they're presenting it is just kind of out of touch with the way people and people who have access to the internet, so everybody actually does calculations these days. See you soon.